Alright, what's up, y'all? How's it going? My name is Evan Strong, the founder of In the Image Clothing Company. This is In the Image Clothing Company Podcast, episode 138, titled Where It Started. I'm anticipating this being a fairly quick episode relative to the length of the other ones that we have in the Image Clothing Company Podcast wise, but if it's, longer than I'm expecting, then there you go. But what this episode is going to be is actually a lot of where In the Image Clothing Company started. There's four sides to us, okay? This is In the Image Clothing Company podcast where we have discussions on the gospel of Jesus Christ, although this will be a little bit of a set-apart episode that's different, okay? It's a little bit of a precursor before you get into it after listening to our intro where I talk about each of the four sides of In the Image Clothing Company and where clothing sits. Just so you know, it's not really going to be so much of a discussion on the gospel of Jesus Christ for this one episode here, episode 138, because this one's a documentation of a lot of things, so it might end up being a little bit longer than I, could anticipate it being if I was anticipating it being shorter. But there's a lot that I did right at the very founding of In the Image Clothing Company, and before it, to even get me in the mindset of doing what we now do, allowing the human body to work. And I'm going to really get into this in whatever depth I do, okay? So, yes, the main side of In the Image Clothing Company, that's what we do. We allow the human body to work. It's the only thing you can do. You can never train the human being, despite popular tries of people. It can't happen. It's just a mechanical machine placed onto a rock in space. There's just a neutral position to every joint of the human being, and it has to reside in that and everything that we do. There's a center line to the human being, the sternum, the spine, the trachea, the nose, and our jaw, naturally stabilizing our entire body, are in the center of 2 feet, opposing, gripping arches inward, keeping us vertical on Earth's gravity. So we address clothing because that's how we get to the human body and allow it to work because it's the only physical thing placed onto us at all times. So it's the only thing that has that high of potential to alter us physically because we are just a physical being, okay? Clothing has to stay centered, fit correct, where I'll discuss in a minute, and ideally be made from 100% natural materials because the human body is, okay? Stretch within clothing goes the opposite direction of the only way that muscles could ever work. Muscles only contract, which is a video under the main side of In the Image Clothing Company, okay? Sleeping, standing, sitting, walking, eating, hydration, breathing, really everything that we do as a human being, we talk about it here because I know the anatomy of the human body in depth and I discuss it very thorough. I'll do some of that within this so that you know and don't think that I'm claiming something, okay? Another fourth of us is In the Image Clothing Company music, and that's one of the things that really led me to be able to found In the Image Clothing Company, and one of the things I'll talk about within this. But I show the sizing and setup of guitars. We just can't alter our hands while we play guitars, doing those fine little motor skills. Our hands are essentially our shoulders. As our feet are essentially our hips, the human body can only ever work activated as a whole. Anywhere any of it goes, all of it comes, and everything has a role to play. No compensation can happen within something that's just all one, okay? So, there you go. Also, music that I make is placed on In the Image Clothing Company music, and as you heard with me there in the intro, I'm very good at guitar. I play fingerstyle, and, I strum as well. I sing, I write songs, I freestyle. A lot of music is actually the majority of what I do, at least as of now, and where my background in music has come from, okay? Mostly, at least, yes, okay? So, yeah, a lot of freestyling, just off the top type of stuff, okay? Actually, on In the Image Clothing Company Music, I just started a new series titled Metronome Madness, and there's 2 episodes of that if you'd like to check them out, okay? So, In the Image Clothing Company Poodles is another one of our fourths, and we specialize in purebred standard poodles. We will breed them, registering them properly under the American Kennel Club, advocating for proper breeding, proper dog ownership, and a lot of other things. Poodle parade events where we get together, standard miniature toy, any size of purebred poodle and or poodle mix can come. You can bring your dogs. We'll hang out in nature, do a lot of things that will give you insights on your dog and being a good owner, how to let dogs stay natural, which is our slogan for In the Image Clothing Company Poodles. A lot of times we will do Clean the Creek events as well, where we clean up trash with our dogs. And, you know, I'll do a lot of things at Poodle Parade events. And also we will have dog products with the same intent behind human being clothing, staying centered, fitting correct, allowing the dogs to work natural materials in all the ways that we can through dog products that have things like, you know, buckles and stuff, you know. There's only so much you can do in cases like that. But there you go, okay? In the Image Clothing Company Poodles, so much more than what I said there. Check it out, stick around, hang out. It's going to be awesome. It already is, and it's only growing continuously, okay? Well, unless it stops growing at one point and just becomes what it is and stays there. I don't know for sure, you know, how that's going to look, but just meaning we're going to be doing a lot more than we're doing as of today under In the Image Clothing Company Poodles, and it's going to be a lot, okay? A big name in poodles is what In the Image Clothing Company Poodles will always be, okay? For many reasons, impactful reasons, not only because dogs are cute, okay? So we have clothing that goes on our bodies. It has to sit in the same location for a man, a woman, if you're tall or short, if you're skinny or fat, any age or from any part of the earth, any time period to ever be. You are just a human being, and your clothing has to sit in the same location, as I am saying here. Pants have to be entirely above the hips, otherwise they're restricting the hips. Slightly higher in the front than the rear for the waistband angle. That's just the neutral position of our hips, how they'd be, the pelvis, okay, and all the functionality that goes into that. And we show how to do that. Drawstrings, you know, the slipped lap knot, loop the looped end toward the center of the human being. Look up how drawstrings affect body mechanics under the main side of In the Image Clothing Company if you'd like to. And, you know, I talk about just pants and what's needed and not needed, okay, for the human body's natural function. Natural, neutral, and normal are synonyms within the human being. There's only one way the human body could ever work. We discuss it as it is. And I'm currently doing adjustments to mine as I'm saying this. When I say adjustments, I just mean releasing the scar tissue in the outer right part of my forearm. Yes, the right forearm. Yes. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So, tops that we wear have seams on top of our shoulders. They need to sit evenly behind the peak of our shoulders. Sometimes I'm just like making all these faces as I'm speaking, and those of you in visual plus audio can see. Those of you in audio only of In the Image Clothing Company podcast, you're not seeing it, probably. Yeah, you're not. So, yeah, the dreaded collar seam modification under In the Image Clothing Company's main site, or wherever you find us, is the only way we're going to have our seams sit evenly on our shoulders. If there's a collar seam in a collar that should sit evenly around our neck, keeping collar centered, right? A video under the main side of In the Image Clothing Company. There's diaphragms, trachea, musculature all over the spine, a lot going on in the neck, and our collars are placed around it. Okay, collarbones, musculature, ligaments, tendons, all the things that connect bones to muscles, right? Going into the jaw from the shoulders, going into the head from the shoulders, and it affects you down to your knees and toes, legitimately. So, two things we have as prerequisites under In the Image Clothing Company after we keep our tops edges of the seams as close to the edges of our shoulders as we can, okay? That's a thing for the tops. Oversized clothing in itself is an imbalance and a very damaging one to the human being. Sometimes it doesn't get seen as that because even if it's centered left to right, forward to back, if it's just too big, your body's dropped lower than its neutral positions in things like the collarbone angle, for example, okay? So, In the Image Clothing Company's shoelacing technique is what we label the only way you can weave a rope across the top of the human feet, call it a shoelace, and not alter the mechanics of our feet, okay? With that, we tie our shoes, and we have to do that evenly on both feet because there's a center line to the human being, so we tie our shoes evenly over toward the inside. Secondly, our other prerequisite is to remove all tags from clothing. Anywhere a tag is placed in clothing, it's either causing a physical gap, not allowing the body to be in its only normal position, okay, its only working position, and or just not allowing musculature to activate and then, yeah, damage through the whole body, okay? Chronic scar tissue and patterning is what we get out of here under In the Image Clothing Company. This is an unconditional That's not quite the word I meant. Unconventional episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast. And I love it because this is set apart, like I said, a little bit of a discussion here that so far has been kind of a rapid pace. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, let's get into this. Holy cow! I'm not. Yeah. I'm not what you might think. I'm not like. I think sometimes people probably think I'm like on drugs or something when, I've got so many sides to me. No, it's just times and places for things. Okay. Sometimes I'm very, very different than other times because there's a dynamic to a human being. Yeah, when we allow ourselves to be what God designed us to be. Okay, designed in the image of Jesus Christ is the human being, and it only could ever do what it's designed to do. So, where this all started actually was strange. Okay, clothing. Yeah. And now that makes more sense, okay, because we're in the Image Clothing Company, and we're about 9.5 months into in-depth discussions of the anatomy of the human body and clothing and what it's doing to it by me, Evan Strong, the founder of In the Image Clothing Company. But at the beginning, and then some people, just at any time ever, it didn't seem to make sense. Like, why are you talking about clothing so much? This guy seems to be so obsessed with shoelaces. Why? Well, because they're ropes placed in shoes. I bought my first pair of barefoot shoes, and there was less material to the shoe. Okay, they're minimal shoes. The barefoot design. Okay, they're just very thin on the bottom. Ideally, a good shape for the toe box and the whole foot, and light. Okay, barefoot shoe designs. Okay, and we get into what's needed and not needed in shoe design to not alter the human being. But our feet have to be flat on the earth. It's called zero drop, the terminology for just no heel or toe spring, right? Or arch support. That's actually a myth. You can't support an arch or it collapses. So a lot of the things we talked about under the main side of In the Image Clothing Company, but this is going to be kind of a rapid fire. As long as it is, if I slow down throughout, then okay. But I started to realize that my right foot was being pulled in such a weird way because there was so much less material to the shoe, so the knot had a greater effect on it, okay, of the shoelace. And when you're tying shoes both one direction to the right, well, that's imbalanced when there's a center line in between the 2 feet. So I started to figure out how to lace and tie shoes by a lot of trial and error, prayer, and revelation. And it took a lot of those things and time. Then I settled on what is now In the Image Clothing Company shoelace technique. And when I say settled on, there just is only one way you can do it. The human foot has the mechanics that it does. The weave of the rope actually just reacts with itself the way that the foot naturally rolls. The pressure that it places on the top of the foot is in the locations that the foot is mechanically shaped. Tying shoes evenly over toward the center line of the human being then allows our feet to roll inward as we walk evenly on both sides, and that's just how the neutral ankle down to the foot and those gripped arches inward, neutral foot pointing straight forward, straight out from that pinky toe, operates. Okay, there's just only one way the human body could ever work. No opinion of mine. God designed it. Okay, I don't ever get to decide any of these things. Truth is truth. It's not something that I could ever have a say over, other than knowing about and saying to other humans so they can know as well, like preaching the gospel, okay, of Jesus Christ, which is what we do here under In the Image Clothing Company podcast. Now, I started to remove tags from things as well because I started to notice that once I had internal rotation of my feet, it did things like get my spine more neutral, but then the spine was pressing into the tags placed in the rear of pants and the rear of the collar of tops. So those had to be removed. And then I removed tags from the sides of clothing as well, which at this time period is so commonly placed on the left side of clothing, which is just pushing your body off to one side when there is a center line. And things like runner's knee, chondromalacia patella, IT band syndrome, right? Those things can be caused solely just from a tag alone placed directly onto the IT band, which is on the outside of that leg, either one of the legs, but the left side is where the tag's almost always placed. And yeah, it's just altering the body, okay, just from that one thing alone. So I started removing all tags from clothing, and then I noticed shoes. They have tags, but they don't protrude normally, meaning they're just like, even with the shoe tongue material, they're almost always in the tongues of shoes. Sometimes they're placed in other locations inside the shoe. But I started to take those tags out. Here's my Zero branded, meaning XERO, Denver canvas black. Okay, the tag has been removed, at least for the most part from the inside of the tongue, as you can see if you're watching visual plus audio of In the Image Clothing Company Podcast, episode 138, titled Where It Started. But we have to do that. Here's my Zero Denver leathers. Okay, same design, although leather instead of canvas. There's a lot of little slits cut into these tags because then there's texture. Okay, those tags are very slippery. They don't allow the musculature of the ankle, which is essentially the whole lower leg and also the whole foot, because the tendons and muscles and ligaments, let me say this, muscles connect to bones through tendons, ligaments connect bones to bones, and all that's going on in the lower part of the body, even from like the knee down, is being entirely affected by a tag in a shoe. So I started to do what I've just explained here by removing them to whatever degree I can without ruining the shoe, because they get really heat shrunk on here sometimes, as these ones are. And then my ankles were able to activate. Then I noticed my right leg was so different than my left, all the way up the right shin. People call it shin splints. No, it's not like a medical term. It's just what has happened to your body through patterning of knots in shoes and slippery materials not allowing your musculature to activate. So rotations happen from tying shoes unevenly that are only rotating your body to the right. So that's internal rotation on the left side, tying that left shoe in a right-handed knot. And that's external rotation on the right side, tying the right shoe in a right-handed knot. And then now your body's twisted from the feet all the way up through your body to the tip of your head and the tips of your fingers. Okay, external on the right, internal on the left. And really the internal on the left is basically just normal. Okay, because when we tie shoes evenly over toward the inside, we tie both feet to the inside, which is allowing internal rotation, but the body dwells within internal rotation. The most strength of the human being is at its center line, with just a center of gravity there. And so that's how the body naturally just works. Okay, muscles connect to the center. Pectorals connect to the sternum, which is in the center. The muscles on the rear of the body, the trapezius, the rhomboids, all the muscles. I mean, I could label all the muscles, but anything that connects to the spine is in the center, okay, and it pulls everything inward. That's where the body actually works. The upper trapezius, for example, they pull in and up, okay, the muscles on top of our shoulders that connect to the rear of the base of our skull and along our spine and the back. So the point is, you can't rotate your body with knots. And so then it's like, oh, so now I've tied my shoes evenly, Evan Strong was saying, which is me, right, when this was happening. But then I noticed my drawstring knot was twisting my hips because my feet were even, but my hips weren't, from a rope around them. So then I found the slipped lap knot. As I said at the beginning, right, we tie the looped end toward the center. Just everything that has a rope that's looping, go to the center line of the human being. I don't want that to be like a blanket statement, but at least, definitely those two knots. Shoes always go over to the center, and the slipped lap knot, one end is that like squiggly loop, and the other end is just a single loop that goes right to the middle of your body. And so then I started doing that, okay? So now I got my body pretty well centered from shoelaces and drawstrings. My tags are removed, and then I noticed there's this seam in collars of t-shirts. And it's so common, like it's unreal kind of common. Here's a t-shirt for those of you in video plus audio that has no seam in it when it comes to the collar. This is the rear of the shirt that I'm showing you. It's just one even piece of material. And that's what we have to have, because there's just, a center to the neck. As I said, all the things going on in the neck. Oh shoot, this one actually doesn't have a collar seam either. That's a good thing, but for the sake of the visual, I was going to show one shirt that did have it. Here we go. This is the rear of the shirt. This is the collar seam. Just meaning any time period ever, if there's a seam and a collar around the neck of our body, well, it's imbalanced. And if it's on the left side, what it does is place the shirt up and to the right. Okay? Gosh, just there's excess material there, bro. And so it's just higher physically, gravity-wise, just the space that it takes up. Oh, shoot, right? Because if gravity's pulling down on something and there's just excess stiffness somewhere, it's going to just, stay higher than the other side, being the right. So the right side drops. Now we can't keep our collars centered because they'll be off to the right with the collar seam on the left. So In The Image Clothing Company's dreaded collar seam modification is this top little band of material, at least on these designs. You just snip that right where the seam comes down and meets this band. It's literally about a millimeter and a half maybe of a little snip right there, just at that top little lip. right? The band that goes across the back of the collar on these designs that ends up becoming the shoulder seams and going across the shoulders as well, okay? There's a little lip on top of it, and there's a little lip on bottom of it. And the little lip on the top, right where the seam that's actually in the collar band material comes down, you just snip that little lip. It's tiny. It seems like maybe it wouldn't do anything, but oh boy, does it. Okay. So when I did that, though, I didn't know what I was doing at first, and I started cutting that band in the rear of the collar that becomes the seams of the shoulder as well, in different locations. I did on the bottom part of the lip at first, and that didn't work good at all. That's going the same direction in a sense as what it's doing with just the seam material imbalancing the collar. And then I tried to do it right in the middle of the band and just like kind of cut a little hole in the center so it's more pliable. And that didn't really work either, because then it still was higher on the left where the seam is, even if it was pliable. And so then I did this, and this is in the Image Clothing Company's dreaded collar seam modification. It's one of the biggest things you could ever do in clothing, okay, if it's there, is what I mean, as far as like a modification to keep something centered that otherwise isn't. So I talk about it so often. I've done it since before I founded in the Image Clothing Company, just as I show. Okay, it has to be done. You look at human beings across the entirety of the earth, and the thing is, if clothing designs entirely change, and there's no such thing as like this design of a seam in a collar at one point, well, people will still be wearing clothing that's made around this time for potentially hundreds plus years from this point forward. Okay, and like I said, it's just anytime there's anything imbalanced around, something that has to have even pressure around it, the sensory system of the human being, right, the physical sense of touch, our nervous system, we notice things touching our neck all the way around, and there's diaphragms in the neck, all the things I said earlier, okay, trachea, musculature, tendons. I mean, there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on. The jaw stabilizes the entire body, and yeah, I mean, you can get deviated septums in your nose, you can get jaw pain, you can get excess cartilage built up in your right ear from, the dreaded collar seam on the left side of the shirts, okay? All these things just from the dreaded collar seam alone. So this is where it started, okay? Now, I didn't know where clothing needed to sit, and the thing with the shoulder seams location is they have to sit evenly behind the shoulders because of what I discussed in the video under the main side of In The Image Clothing Company titled Shoulders Follow Shoulder Seams. The shoulders will follow the shoulder seams, and our shoulders only ever work behind our head, just that's where they mechanically work. The scapulas, which are the big bones on the upper back, they sit behind the rib cage, and then the muscles that connect from the shoulders to the base of the rear of the skull, or the upper trapezius, they connect, as I said at the beginning, at the very base of the rear of the skull, along the spine of the neck, called the cervical spine, and then to the top and rear of the shoulders. So our shoulders only ever work behind our head. That's the only way you can ever have a neutral wrist and proper hand working in line, the only way that it could ever work without binding, because the hands are essentially the shoulders. Okay, even rotations in the forearms, that comes from shoulder seams directly, but it can come from even your feet directly. When I say directly, I just, everything in the body is everything else. It's only one thing. Everything has a role to play, otherwise it doesn't work. So, yeah, I mean, things like rotations in the forearms, okay? Oh, gosh. The thing is, I wore oversized clothing for so many years, so I had no idea what it meant for clothing to fit. I'm 25 years old now. I'm not going to get any taller or, like, bigger in a sense, right? I mean, other than, like, slight fluctuation in body fat percentage or whatever, muscle mass, right? I was wearing larges and extra larges in tops when I was in junior high, for example, okay? And just throughout most all my life until recent, my size is actually medium in tops, and always will be, okay? I'm full grown, and I would only ever need smaller than that going back, right, when I was younger and not as full grown as I am now. And I am completely full grown at this point, okay? So, keeping short sleeves short, right? We need to keep things off the forearms. There's rotations in the forearms. There's just two bones, okay? The hands are the feet. The wrists are the ankles, the forearms are the lower leg, the elbows are the knees, the upper arm is the upper leg, and the shoulders are the hips. Okay, that's how the human body really is designed. And then the spine connects the two. parts of the body, the legs and the arms, okay? It's just how it is. There's only one difference in the amount of bones in between the hands and the feet. Their operations are so similar. You know, I discussed a little bit of that at the beginning. The neutral parts of them are both the pinkies, okay? The wrist and the ankle are the pinky finger and pinky toe are the neutrals, okay? If you can understand how I just worded that. I just didn't say it exactly how it might be most clearly phrased, but I'm flying through this if I'm flying through this, okay? So there's a lot that's happening in the forearms, and we need rotations. And I'm going to get into that in a later date, in other ways. There's videos under the main site of In The Image Clothing Company titled Patterning in the Forearm, Internal Rotation at the Forearm. The one I said about the short sleeves, right? Short sleeves short is what it was. But how sleeve cuffs affect body mechanics, keeping things off the wrist, and then you can have rotations in your forearms. Otherwise, you cannot. So same with, ankles, feet, and pant cuffs. How pant cuffs affect body mechanics. We have to keep them off the feet. Otherwise, you don't have activated arches because they're just being collapsed by something placed on top of them. So your neutral ankle then is gone, and then your rotations in your lower leg can't be there, and then your hips are altered. Your pelvis goes out of its only neutral position into an anteriorly rotated position, which then travels up, and your spine excessively curves. Your shoulders go out of their only neutrals. Your hands are no longer neutral, okay, from that wrist position that we're discussing. It's not there anymore at that point. Your head is forward. Your jaw is not sitting in its only neutral location. Okay, so much happens. Cartilage gets built up in the ears at that point. They're only just a hole between the rear of the base of the jaw, the lower jaw, and the base of the skull. So there's a lot that happens, and that's just a very basic rundown, which is crazy because that's pretty in-depth. But, just from things like pant cuffs. That's where I got to that with just then, truly. So clothing, it's the only fix to human beings' physical problems. And I didn't know at first all of what I needed to do. And so, I started to cut up jeans because I used to wear jeans all the time. Jeans on the rear have all these angles, like really all of these angles. I mean, it does. It's got a band of material that goes around the waist. It has belt loops often. And then you've got these uneven stitches that come down to the center of the back of the jeans. Then you've got that center stitch that goes around the crotch that is normally double stitched and overlapped to where it presses the pelvis forward on the right side, and then the pelvis rotates anteriorly and to the left, which externally rotates your left side, and so your right, externally rotates your right side. I just said the wrong side, but I'm saying it how it is. Golly. Okay, so the right foot then sticks out. The arch can never grip in that location that is placed from just the stitch in the rear of pants alone if it's double stitched with the right side forward, rotating the whole pelvis like that. And that's the same position tying shoes to the right will do. So the whole thing with this is I started cutting up jeans to try to get them more balanced. And then you've got the little flap behind the zipper in the front of the pants because that's there to protect our bodies from the metal part of the zipper. And that's great, although it closes off the left side of the pant leg and doesn't allow it to have its normal motion. So the left side of our body is like basically stuck stationary and pretty well working okay. And then the left side is just inhibited. Oh my gosh, I said left twice. The right side gets so inhibited because it's chronically external. It's chronically away from its own center. It's chronically just opened up. And the left side, like I'm saying, it can work pretty darn normally because we're just almost always on our left leg as human beings. Look around and see it. It's just how it is because of the things that I've talked about up until now. We'll do it alone and everything else that does it. The right-handed world, a video under the main site of In The Image Clothing Company, right? Clothing patterns themselves, as I've said up until now, a lot of these things are right-handed and a lot more that we discuss under In The Image Clothing Company K. So, yeah, just things designed to be used as well in the world are right-handed because 85%, give or take, of the population at this time period are right-handed, okay? So we use it for the majority of things, the right over the left. Now, the right over the left, okay? We need to keep our right hand over our left, okay? The right hand needs to be on top because everything's placing it on bottom. in the imbalances that I'm discussing here, and the things we talked about under the Image Clothing Company. Okay, so internal rotation also just elevates the body, external rotation drops the body. So getting the right hand higher requires internal rotation to happen. And when your body is being externally rotated from things like all that we've discussed here on the right side, right? Then, yeah, there you go, damage to the body. So a big thing is I started cutting up jeans in the rear to get all those stitches to try to be even, and I didn't know what to do because it just wasn't really working. You've got a whole side of the pants overlapped from the other side of the pants, which is the left. It's on the outside, the over side, the side that has more volume in a sense, but not, because then they place that stitch, like I'm saying, in that little flap that actually closes the left side off. I think, sometimes they try to counterbalance things, but you can't. There has to be an even two sides because Earth's gravity and like two lungs of the human being, for example, right? That's just one of the many things that there's two of opposing the center in the human being. So then socks, right? We got to pull our socks up evenly and rotate them externally slightly, just following that outward curvature of the lower leg that's naturally there. And so I played with a lot of different socks, and I had socks that were stretchy. I had socks that had like fake arch support in the center that actually deactivates the arches in your feet because muscles only contract, and now you've got this stretchy, weird band of material squeezing into the muscles. It doesn't work for them. They can't work with it. And, ankle socks, they stop at the ankles, and that's right on the joint, and that can deactivate the ankles as well. So tall socks, is what I realized we ideally need to have for every human on the earth. Okay. And yeah. So there's a lot that I did at the founding, and, well, meaning that allowed me to found in the Image Clothing Company. And there's just weight that's on the right side of clothing. Zippers are often on the right side. Men's and women's designs are sometimes quite different, and sometimes women's stuff is on the left and men's stuff is on the right, quote unquote. I mean, when that happens, but like buttons for men's clothing is almost always on the right as far as button-ups go, and women's are often on the left side, right? So things like this, weight-wise, now we've got imbalances left to right, and then just learning where the shoulders work was a big thing, because having my shoulders in front of my body for so many years in a position they can never work in, you've got this little sternocleidomastoid muscle that connects right behind our ears, basically, onto the skull, and it comes down and connects to the clavicle, which is our collarbone, right where it meets the sternum, and then the sternum as well, okay? It comes down and it kind of splits off with two insertions like that, and that little muscle tries to take over for what the trapezius muscle can do. There's three trapezius, the upper, mid, and lower, but the upper trapezius is right next to, in a sense, the sternocleidomastoid. And it's such a larger muscle, just physically, size-wise, and it just has other muscles that work with it. And when the shoulder's sitting in its only neutral location behind the head, then the trap can just work, the upper trapezius, okay? But if the shoulder comes in front of the body, because of shoulder seams, for example, collars in the rear of shirts, they're just going to place the shoulders in just terrible position for the only way they could ever work, meaning they can't in that location that they're placed into because of tags. A lot of things, right, in clothing that we talk about will do it. Then this little muscle tries to take over for the trapezius, and it just can't, and so it gets so bound up. And now you've got pain through your whole head, physical skull, right? Your jaw, your ear, your eye, your nose, the deviated septum, as I'm saying, meaning the center of your nose will just go off to the right because your whole body's to the right in this right-handed patterning, the right-handed world, clothing oversized, falling to your dominant side, which is the right. Okay, so this is where it all started, is learning about how clothing's affecting the body, and then, well, what do we need to do to just stop things from affecting the body, because God designed it to work, so it just will, unless there's a reason it won't, meaning can't. Okay? And so now I know. There's little tabs in the tongues of shoes, brother, sometimes. Some shoes are amazing, they just don't even come with them. But those little tabs in the tongues of shoes try to force the foot to just like track perfectly straight like this, up and down, and the feet roll inward just mechanically. Look at the ends of the toes. The big toe is the longest. It's in the center. the body, right? If you put your feet together, and then as you go out to the outside of the body, the pinky toe comes down. It's kind of like an arrow pointing forward when your feet are together, and they roll evenly off the toes, which is going to cause them to roll inward because the length of the toes is different, coming longer to the center and shorter to the outside. So you can't have something, like a shoelace technique or a tab in the tongue of shoes holding the tongue in the center, right? Meaning, the shoe actually needs to be off to the outside slightly, because that's just the only way the feet mechanically work with just their operation, okay? So there you go. Cut out the tongue tabs of your shoes, right? How shoe tongue tabs affect body mechanics is a video I made in 2024. I mean, this was at the very founding. This is what I mean. This is where it all started, is all these things. As I'm saying, and as I've said, and as we always will say, I've been saying the same things since the founding, because it just is what it is. The human body is just a mechanical machine. So no matter what clothing designs ever look like or change or add or take away, or what materials start to get used or stop being used or whatever, it's about the angles and locations of where clothing sits on the human body to allow it to work, and that will never change. God's design has been the same since forever, because he's the same yesterday, today, and forever, and he's the beginning and the end. Jesus the Christ, okay? And we're designed in the image of God, Jesus Christ himself. So this is where it started with the shoes. It was a big deal getting my first pair of barefoot shoes. And then I bought my first pair of Zero shoes, and I shout them out all the time, dude. I love them. I'm almost certain one day, and yeah, very, very, very much almost certain that we're going to be doing things together, Zero Shoes and In the Image Clothing Company, because they're great, okay, and we're great for the sake of what we're doing for the human body. And so it'll be an amazing two companies to get together, yeah, almost certain that's going to happen. I am almost certain, and I would love to. Okay, so shout out to Steven. As far as I'm aware, he's the founder of Zero Shoes. But I bought my first pair of Zero shoes, and they were used. It was the model Toronto, which was actually discontinued at the time, and then I'm pretty sure they brought it back after that time. And they had been worn by somebody. I bought them on the internet, and who wore them had actually tied their shoes unevenly. And so they were worn in a way where the right shoe, because both shoes were tied to the right one would have been external at that point, right? It was worn like that. And so it never quite felt right. And those were the shoes, along with my first pair of barefoot shoes, which was a different brand, that I really was like trial and erroring, if you will, and emphasis on quite a lot of the error, but that's how we learn, is by failure, mistakes, and things. Okay, those are good things to do as human beings. That's where we grow. But having the shoe upper, just meaning the top part of the shoe that's not the sole, be worn in a patterning that was imbalanced anyway, was kind of hard to figure out then what, lacing was actually doing, because there was still the imbalance worn into the actual material of those Torontos by Zero Shoes, because they were used and tied uneven by the previous owner, okay? But I ended up cutting those shoes because they're actually similar to the Denver in a lot of ways, by Zero Shoes. So I ended up cutting the top part of the upper off and making them regular, like, low top shoes, and that was a whole thing in itself. So there was just a lot that I did like this. What I was saying with the jeans and all these slits and snips I was doing into them, shoe lacing and just trying that, and different techniques. Tying shoes, yeah, that took a while for me to understand that they just need to be tied evenly over toward the inside, and that was, hell that I went through, just rotating your entire body in ways that it never could work, because I didn't know quite how it could or did yet. Yeah, it was scary. A lot of what I went through it was very, very, very scary at times. My body was just, being so altered by things, knots from ropes, shoelaces, drawstrings. Because that's the thing, is I start tying drawstrings over to the left rather than tying a right-handed knot. I'm like, well, what if I just do it the other way? And, it's definitely just taking your pelvis the exact opposite direction, right? Putting it in the exact opposite position in a left-handed knot as it would in a right-handed knot. But No, it needs to just be exactly even horizontal, just because Earth's gravity and just there's two legs that come up into the pelvis, right? And it's just a solid structure of the leg. There's no give to it. Shifting weight deactivates muscles. That's a video under the main side of In the Image Clothing Company. There's a center, and the arches have to grip evenly, opposing each other. And so there you go, okay? But I also did things like at the tail end of shirts. You see me with my shirt tails rolled up because there's that double stitch at the bottom of shirt tails. And I didn't know that it was like the stitching material that was gripping my pants and hips that was causing the problem. But I noticed there was some like little excess shirt tail material like next to where the double stitch was. And so I cut that little shirt material off, but it was actually just the grippiness of the actual stitch that was doing a lot of it. Um, but I just started cutting that, just little excess material around seams that just wasn't like so cleanly done. Like this is actually very clean here on the sleeve of this shirt, but sometimes you just got excess material where it's folded over and stitched, but the fold, kind of sticks out past the seam. So I was cutting stuff like that, and I'd be wearing hoodies at the time that had like a waisted base around them that had stretch to it. And I didn't know anything about materials. And so I didn't know you couldn't wear stretchy materials without them going the opposite direction of the only way that muscles could ever work. Okay. I just had no idea. And I didn't know that we need to be in 100% natural materials. I didn't really know what materials any of my clothing was made out of, unless it was like leather. I didn't know. I didn't even know to look for those things. I didn't know the difference between stretchy clothing and clothing that didn't stretch. I mean, didn't notice it, is what I mean. I just didn't. So, yeah, a lot of stuff, cutting like just like little holes, all, like spaced certain distance apart, like an inch apart, all the way around the inside of the base of my hoodie tails, if you will, like where they go around the waist, just to see what that would do. And then I would do it to shirts. And like sometimes I would, well, yeah, I would try to do it on only the front half of the shirt tail to maybe like open that part up more, or do it on only the rear half of the shirt tail. I just didn't really know what needed to happen yet. And so I was just experimenting, even on these, sleeve cuffs, just meaning the sleeves where there's that like folded over part. Same thing. I just do like little snips, like just little holes around the inside of that fold of the sleeve cuff, because I didn't know what needed to happen, but I was just trying things, and I was praying and praying and praying and just trying to figure out what needed to happen. And I didn't know yet fully, and so I just kept trying, dude. And yeah. So then I learned about materials, and actually one of my cousins, I don't even think he said it to me direct, but here at this house that I live, we had a family party. This was, yeah, quite some time ago, around a year ago at least. Golly. Well, I think at least, but maybe somewhere right around a year ago, somewhere around that time from this point back, he said that human beings really should only be in 100% cotton. And then I was like, wait, what? Materials matter? More than just like having a preference? And yeah, they do, big time. And I didn't know that polyester was just plastic. You know, it's just oil. And so they take oil and, make little tiny fine strands of it, weave it together. And that's what a lot of our clothing is made out of that's sold nowadays. And it's just placing oil, encapsulating your whole body, and that's just going into your body, seeping into your skin. We have holes in our skin called pores, right, where perspiration or sweat comes out and things go in as well. I've said it many times. It's like using a topical cream to heal your body on the inside. Well, anything you place onto your skin goes inside of it as it does. Okay, it just does. It does, and I didn't know. So even materials in shoes, if we're having unnatural materials, and I'm not perfect in having only natural materials, but I really do try where I can. And in the Image Clothing Company, clothing will always be 100% natural materials, unless there's something that we really can't do that with, like a zipper, if, we even have those, which I don't know if we ever will even have zippers because they interlock one over the other. And that's another thing I did at the founding, is zippers interlock, and one side has to be on top. And so now you've got something in the center of your body with one side of it on top of the other side. Now your whole body is just misaligned from that. And so in the Image Clothing Company's zipper modification, we take that top side and just do a little snip right, where the zipper's connecting, but like right above the highest little thing, little metal piece that, connects to the other side. And doing that, it allows that higher side to just fall, ideally just even. And so now the zipper is just exactly vertical. Okay, that's the ideal. And so it's things like this I found at the founding, dude. I've been saying the same thing since the founding, and I always will, because nothing will ever change. Like I'm saying, as long as the human body is what it is, and it could never be anything else, okay? We're just clothing the human body with something, whether it is glasses that I wore for 2 years, and now, yes, I do have a deviated septum, and so much less now as it was even just yesterday, no joke. But then, yeah, through this process, I've been getting my nose to be more centered after just, glasses sitting on my head, moving my body out of its center line because my feet were being rotated, traveling to the tip of my head from knots in shoelaces, right? Just ropes imbalanced to the right for so many years, okay? But even the shoelacing technique, it affects the ability for there to be room for the arches. And I discussed that at the beginning, actually, a lot of what that does. I actually did it pretty thorough. So yeah, right? Yeah, it's just, yeah. And then, now we've got this knowledge that I had of ideally cotton, okay, natural. And so then it's like, okay, well, now I'm noticing that sometimes my shoelaces are very stretchy and my arches will try to grip and they just will not stop gripping, and then they don't grip at that point because now they're trying to stabilize against something that's not stable, and so they tense up, and then your feet get tense and don't work the only way that they ever could, designed by God. So those Zero Toronto shoes that I bought used actually came with what could be called climbing laces, and they weren't just like a round rope. They had a lot of like texture to them. I don't really know how to explain it more than that, but they would like really grip on each other, and they had no give to them either, in addition. So those were great. And then at times I had other laces in my shoes, and using same techniques when I was trying to figure out just the only way the human foot is shaped and how to weave a rope across the top of that, because my feet weren't shaped the only way the human feet actually work, because after years of patterning, bone spurs, scar tissue, shortening of muscles, right? Tendons and things moving, literally. That's what bone spurs are, right? Is that something's pulling on a bone in a position that it's not able to actually track normally in, and it just grows the bone. And the insertion of the tendon to the bone just moves and grows. And so my feet didn't even work normal. And so I didn't know how the human feet should work. I didn't know how shoelacing should feel because my feet didn't work how they need to, the only way they actually can. And so it was a big process because I didn't know what the foundation was, meaning like the human body in its only normal. I didn't have a knowledge of that at the time. And so I was learning it as I went out of personal experience with my own body. Because bones can't move. They're just they're very, hard. They don't have any give or bend in them. Oh my gosh. Okay, so let's jump over here for a second. Guitars, okay? I was playing flat fretboard guitars, okay? And your human hands are rounded. But your human hands can never be rounded if your feet aren't allowed to have arches. So if your shoelaces are collapsing your arches in your feet, your hands are never going to work rounded. You'll never have a neutral wrist. Now your hands are altered, so are your shoulders. Now your shoulder seams, even sitting in the correct location, won't ever feel okay for your whole body. Do you see what I'm saying? I almost guarantee you do, because I'm discussing this quite thorough, okay? And I can get in depth. This isn't like in depth for what I know right now. I'm serious, and that's what I say and what I've been saying since the founding. In the Image Clothing Company just is and always will be and is going to continually grow to be even more huge, because it's just truth. It's just what it is. And it's crazy how much I know, dude. God gave me all this. I'm not sitting here reading books or looking at anatomy you know, things. I mean, this is personal experience and this is personal revelation from Jesus Christ, because this is my lifelong endeavor. In the Image Clothing Company and Evan Strong are one. That's an episode title of In the Image Clothing Company podcast, okay? So, anyway, there you go, okay? And even as of today, I'm still doing a lot of work to rid scar tissue in my body. And it's just nuts. So, yeah, the big things of where it all started are things like the dreaded collar seam modification, things like shoelaces and drawstrings, things like understanding that wearing boots with heels for so many years chronically shortened certain parts of my body that needed to be able to release. Okay. I mean, you can never have calf tightness if your calves are just working the only way God designed them, just because nothing's restricting them. But you place heels under your feet, and now you've just shortened the distance of your calf muscle because you've put it into its range of motion. It's essentially just like standing on your toes all the time, to the degree of whatever the height of your heel is under your foot on your shoe. I didn't know these things, and people just don't know these things. So now all these shoes that I have here, I've got 4 pairs of shoes on the ground, and the ones I'm currently wearing right now, they're all zero drop. 2 of them are zero branded, as in XERO, but all the other ones, well, there's another pair here that's not, and those are a very specific pair that has kind of a story behind them. But I don't really wear those. They're kind of a specific shoe, like I'm saying, the reason I have them. But yeah, just, my feet are just as if I had no shoes on as far as the height from heel to toe. That's the only way your feet could ever work. So I didn't know it though, man. I had no idea. And so I had so much damage in my whole body to the tip of my head and the tips of my fingers from wearing boots for years that had an inch tall heel on them, okay? And then any other shoe as well, just for my whole life that had any kind of discrepancy from heel to toe, okay? Or arch stuff underneath the arches of our feet that damages the feet. I mean, there's tendons and muscles underneath the feet that just need to close together. And if there's something placed in their way, they can't work. An arch is strong from the top. If you support it from underneath, you're not supporting it. You're actually just collapsing it. And Steven from Zero Shoes did a beautiful explanation of that with blocks. And I got a lot of information on shoe needs from Steven from Zero Shoes. And yeah, I mean, Postural Restoration Institute talks about a lot of the patterning that happens in human beings, but as far as I'm aware, they don't know where it's coming from. They just do what they do to address it. But you'll never rid it if you're still within clothing that's always been the reason that it was caused anyway. Okay, but I do want to give credit where credit is, being given by me. There you go. Because, I did get some information from people like that. But as far as they gave me like an introduction to an understanding of what I need to know things like, basic like introduction things, and then I got just in such depth, man. Yeah, and it's crazy just how much I know about the human body. It's unreal. It's absurd, actually, if I'm saying it about myself. Like, it's crazy. Because I mean, I couldn't take credit for it. It's just nuts. So yeah, I mean, that's a lot of what happened at the founding. I mean, like the very, very, like what allowed me to found In the Image Clothing Company. Yes, a lot of those things that I just said. So I just want to make it clear, man, is, I mean, basically what I just said, I could never, no matter one day, maybe I'm trying to, I'm getting all egoic about it. And like, I really do know better than most all specialists on the earth. But it's nothing to do with me. It's just the understanding I have of God's design. And so if I ever do try to get like, trying to take credit for anything, it doesn't matter, right? That's why I say so many times I have underpassed In the Image Clothing Company content. Don't believe me. It's not about me, right? Leave me alone. Like, it's nothing to do with me other than I'm the deliverer of the information. Because I didn't decide any of this. And that's what I keep saying with, just how crazy it is that I'm able to know all these things. I'm just a kid from Utah, bro, that loves standard poodles, you know? And I wore oversized clothing for years. I never had any kind of like understanding of what it meant for clothing to fit. You know, all these things that is just my experience. How do I know what I know? You know, I know the answer, and I can tell you right now, it's because of God Himself, Jesus the Christ. Because I'm doing His work, I'm doing His will. I'm helping sons and daughters of Him, which is just all the humans on the earth. We're equal sons and daughters of God. Know how their own body works, and there you go. Okay, so there you go, and there you go. So I'm gonna cut it. I'm gonna cut it, and I'm gonna cut it. Thank you. Thank you, and thank you. I'm gonna say this though, the guitars, right? I was playing flat fretboard guitars. The human hands are round. They've been around longer than guitars have because they're what was used to make guitars, and often, yeah, guitars are just damaging human bodies. So we need a radius in our guitars, meaning a rounding to them. We have so many things in modern day that are flat and our hands are round. So we have to have a radius to everything that we used. Incorporating a radius in daily life is some videos that I made. There was at least 2 or 3 of those under the main site of In The Image Clothing Company back in 2024 at the very founding of In The Image Clothing Company. And also fingernails. You know, there's times in my life where I just never had fingernails that were anywhere near long enough, but they need to be entirely supporting the tips of the fingers. And I didn't know that until I did. And that was after a lot of this happened, right? I mean, and during a lot of it as well, though, yeah, right? I mean, just this whole process, it's been a lot. Fingernails and toenails, same thing, okay? Ideally cut relatively flat on the tips. You can round the corners so they're not sharp, but then, you know, you have just natural support to your fingers, and you're just strong naturally. You feel like you have a grasp on reality because otherwise you don't, because you've just literally taken away your actual physical support from your extremities if you've cut your fingernails too short. Okay, so there you go. That's where I'm going to leave this. Today is the 25th of June, 2025. My name is Evan Strong, the founder of In The Image Clothing Company. Check out In The Image Clothing Company Poodles. Stick around for the poodles. Check out the other 3 sides of the company if you'd like to. I said the other 3 sides, but really, I mean, I just mentioned one of the other 3 sides. So just check us out. 4 sides to us as a whole. We speak eternal truths. We talk about things that will never change. I'm not perfect. You don't have to believe me. And there you go. Check out the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We're obviously, if you know where our company name comes from, centered around the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so that's where you're going to find the fullness of the truth of all things is in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So thank you, and thank you. Yeah. Goodbye.